Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here, CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today I've got Chuck Blakeman. Chuck and I are going to talk about rehumanizing the workplace by giving everybody a voice. We're also talking about your book, aren't we, Chuck? Because we need to mention this.
Yes, we are.
I read this over Christmas and New Year, and I really loved it. Running a startup and needing to start with a culture and stuff, I really like the ability to, I've got to start somewhere, so here's a good place. And you talk about the art and science of distributed decision making, and I'm guessing we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well.
Yes, we will. I'm excited about it.
Good. So, Chuck, rehumanizing the workplace. I mean,
sounds rather morbid, doesn't it? It's like
it is like we start. Here we are sitting in a global pandemic. Yeah. It doesn't seem to get any better. I've actually just been on a Twitter chat where we've been talking about the way that the future of work and the way that things have changed, and I think everybody's saying that the future of work is today.
That's right. Yeah, we just pushed back. We pushed forward, probably fast forward about 10 years with this pandemic, maybe more. So we've reached 10 years from now this year, and there's a lot behind that.
So we talk about giving people their brain back. What do you mean by that? So why did you write the book, and what do you mean by giving people the brain?
Yeah, well, we wrote the book because work has been dehumanized, and it's interesting that there's a word in the English language called dehumanize. That word exists. Rehumanize is not a word.
Right.
It doesn't exist. It's like, well, we can dehumanize, but apparently we can't get it back. Once we've done it, it's over. So we think that ought to be a word. But we've dehumanized work. Before the factories, most of the good stuff and all of the bad stuff, pretty much, that we can talk about work was canonized in the factories. It didn't start there necessarily, but that's where it got its cement. So if you don't like something about work, you can go back to the factories and start chipping away at that. And before the factories, work was much more human. There was this interesting thing called integration, which everybody thinks is a new idea today. No, it's not. We're just going back where we came from. In 1850 was the first time that more people left their homes to go to work than actually just got out of bed and worked.
Because you talk a lot about the factory system, and that's in effect everything that I've ever known, which is I've got out of bed and got to work.
Yeah.
Whereas before the factory system, you worked in your house.
Yeah. It's an interesting statistic. Somewhere around 90% of all free people before the factory systems owned their own business. 90%. Today it's 15%. And people think the 15% are weird. No, they're normal. The rest of them have been weirded. They took the cobbler and shoved him into a shoe factory, and off we went. And we dehumanized work. Instead of being able to make a shoe, now you put a nail in the left boot and pass it to the guy beside you, and he puts a nail in the right boot. You can teach somebody how to do that in 20 minutes, and everybody's replaceable. And everything is pulled down to its dumbest, it's dumbed down to its smallest part, so that we can McDonaldize work. That was Michael Gerber's contention in his book in 1986, The E-Myth, that we need to make everything so process-driven, so broken down that any dum-dum could do it, and it dehumanizes work. But that's not the worst thing to dehumanize. That's one thing that dehumanized it. The worst thing was the inability to make decisions.
No.
One thing makes us, two things make us human. The fact that we're aware, and secondly, that we're creative. The antelope are going to cross the stream for 10,000 years. We're going to cross it 4 times. We're going to build a bridge. We're going to figure this out. What makes us adult? That's the unique thing here we're dealing with, why I wrote this book. One thing makes us adult rather than children, and that is this fancy term, agency of responsibility. Non-fancy term, the ability to make decisions.
Yeah.
What's the one thing you can't do at work since the factory system? Make decisions.
Yeah.
So, gee, what a surprise. We have been de-adultified, and the creativity is taken out of us when you can't make decisions, because creativity is nothing more than a series of decisions. We've been dehumanized. Where's the proof in that? Gallup has been taking a survey for every month for, I don't know, 20 years. Every month it comes back that around 28 to 32% of the workforce is engaged. The other 70% are just phoning it in. They're just putting in whatever time they have to get by. 84% of people at work have not found something they love doing. 84%. So we know this is broken. We've known since the factory system was brought in from the military, who got it from slavery, by the way. It came from slavery through serfdom, through the military, into the factories. We know that the top-down pyramid scheme has been broken because it only benefits the people at the top. And that's what pyramid schemes do. They use the people at the bottom to benefit the people at the top, and the people at the bottom feel used and dehumanized. So that's why I wrote this book. Is there's been companies out there for 60 plus years who have broken this rule, have not gone with the factory system pyramid, and are at the top of their game.
So you talk about companies like Goretex.
Yeah.
For example, which are world famous for not following the traditional factory system. So what is it that makes them different?
Yeah, Bill and Vivian Gore founded that in 1958 in their basement. And for 65 years now, they've had no managers.
Right.
Not a manager in the whole place. They have leaders, but leaders are people that people look at and say, hey, can you lead me? Because managers have reports, leaders have followers. Most companies have no leaders, 0 leaders. And the way you can prove that is because nobody was actually given the opportunity to follow. They were told, this is your manager. So Goretex is very different. The woman who leads Goretex now, nobody thought she'd get voted in, even her. She was surprised. She calls herself the chief troublemaker, not the CEO. And so if you want to lead, you better have something to contribute. And if you do, then people will follow you. And that's how that company works. The second thing it works on is what we call distributed decision making. And that's the art and science of distributed decision making. Gore had it down in 1967. He wrote a paper called The Lattice Organization. And in that book, he just in that 16-page paper, he did a simple little illustration of, if Bob wants to talk to Sally, Bob talks to Sally. If Team A wants to talk to Team B, they talk to Team B. And there's no manager to mess it up. So the efficiencies at Gore are stunning. Now we have all 8 general aviation engine factories working that way. They make 1/3 of the engines in the world, and hundreds of other very large corporations, some with up to 75,000 people, no managers in the whole place. So it's not like this is even an interesting sidebar. It's like, well, these are weird offbeat companies. No, there's too many of them. This is mainstream stuff.
And you talk about in the book about using distributed decision making in terms of getting people to have a purpose.
Yeah, it's distributed decision making is not chaos and anarchy, not at all, because nobody in a what we call the participation age makes a decision by themselves. There's always 2 questions that you ask for every decision. We call it, ready for this, 2-step decision making. We really thought hard about that. Step number 1.
Did you have a meeting for that one? Sorry.
Yeah, we had a meeting for that. Yeah. Step number 1, whoever has to make the decision, whoever has to carry out the decision should make it. So we ask ourselves, who has to carry out this decision? Who has to make the copies? They should buy the copier. Now, if that's all we did, that'd be chaos and anarchy. Question number 2 solves it all. Question number 2 is, well, who else will be impacted by this decision? They may never have to make a copy, but they'll be impacted by this decision. So you got finance, technology, the customers of the copies. You got all kinds of people you better talk to before you buy a copier, and they all want to be involved in this decision. Simple distributed decision making is a 2-step process, and when we do those 2 steps, we don't need a manager.
So take us through what you mean by you don't need a manager. How does that work?
Yeah, so when in the traditional top-down pyramid scheme, we ask the question, who can do this? And it's always singular. If there's an opportunity or an obstacle, who can solve this? And we're looking for Steve Jobs. We're looking for some genius. In the participation age, it's the exact same question, who can do this? But it's multiple people. We look for a team. There's 10 things Google defined as imperative that a manager provide to their people. I don't know anybody who can do all 10 of those things. Most people can do 5, some can do 6. A freaking heroic genius could do 7. But you put 3 or 4 people in a room, and I know you'll cover all 10 of them. So let's break up all the things that one manager used to do, and let's give them to people who are actually good at those things on the team. And we've got 10 people on the team. One guy who used to be the manager, now he's doing the 5 things, or she's doing the 5 things she's actually good at. And the other 5 things are being done by 2 or 3 other people. We've got 3 or 4 leaders on the team. And I go to Bob for meetings. I go to Sally for reports. I go to John for training. And everybody's really good at it, and all 10 things are being delivered. So who is plural.
And I think the great thing about distributing that is that you get the right people to do the work. But what you're doing is that you're empowering people and you're giving people purpose. And you're trusting people as well.
So I've got my job, but I've also got this thing I've never been allowed to do that I'm really good at. Or run the data, or do their training, or fill in the blank. There's this one other thing that I'm really good at. It has nothing to do with my job. The manager was supposed to do that, and the manager's crappy at it, and it just ticks me off because I'm way better than them. That's how Scott Adams made millions of dollars. It's called Dilbert.
Yes.
I'm better than the manager at this, but I have to somehow tell the manager they're better at it, or get them to figure out what I'm supposed to, what I already know. We can just get rid of the whole Dilbertized environment and build what we call distributed decision-making teams, DDM teams.
Yeah. So one of the things in the book, you go through all the stages in terms of the whole of the employee life cycle. So you talk about recruitment, for example, and different methods of recruitment. For example, in your business, you don't look at the CV, do you? Or you don't look at the CV until quite later on in the process.
We've got an 11-step process for hiring, and we look at the CV or the resume around step 7 or 8 when we're already down to 4 or 5 people. We haven't looked at a resume until we're down to 4 or 5 people. And we've taught a lot of businesses to do that. And this is one of the biggest things. They've come back and said, this is pure genius. I wish I'd been able to, I wish I could say I made it up. I actually got snarky one day and just put out a really long ad and did something completely different, and it worked. It wasn't genius, but it was just, let's try something different. So hiring, onboarding, mentoring, training, the way we set the structure of the business up, instead of a pyramid scheme, we have a community of teams. It's a lateral community. And the whole point of this is to take the community from a top-down pyramid scheme to where we begin to rely on each other as peers horizontally. So we have 12 tools of distributed decision-making that puts everything on its side. And now I'm looking at my peers and saying, how can I get what I need from my peers?
And that's and I know that in the book you talk also about how you have, which is, and this is a bit of a revolutionary thing, is that you have adult conversations with people.
Yeah, what a concept.
Yeah, because normally you actually say to someone, "Can I be adult with you?" Which means you're going to tell them some bad news, or you need to be direct with them. And I can never understand why we weren't adult all the time. But yeah, let's have an adult conversation. Always have adult conversations.
Well, this goes to the whole concept of managers being codependents. The traditional definition of codependent: doing for others what they could or should do for themselves. That's the definition of a manager. And if I don't like somebody's breath, I go to my manager and say, hey, you need to talk to this guy about his breath. So I got a mommy or a daddy at work who will do my adulting for me. Grow up. This is part of the opportunity. We get the privilege and the responsibility of decision making. So we get both. So we teach people how to do that. We teach them the no gossip rule. If you're not involved in a problem, you're not involved in the solution, it's gossip. Well, that was the role of the manager before. They were never part of the problem, never part of the solution. I'm going to go to them and have them handle my problem. So, yeah, adulting becomes a fun thing, an encouraging thing. And then we realize we feel better about ourselves when we learn how to actually do this kind and a direct adulting at work. We call it carefrontations.
Right. If I'm how do I know what my job is and what to do? So you talk in the book about mission. So explain that up to us.
Yeah. So this is not chaos and anarchy. This is more organized than the top-down pyramid scheme. Number one, we're all mission-driven. Instead of being driven by my boss or my department, we all give that up and say the only reason we exist at the pleasure of the mission. What is the mission? We all exist to do that. And any energy we have is toward that, not toward how do I get a bigger budget or build a moat around my department or any of that nonsense. And so that becomes a huge part of this. And we teach people how to leave that departmental view of the world and get back into a mission-driven view of the world. And then we teach them process. In the participation age, we all have very broad roles or very, very broad functions and very specific roles. So I might be at the front desk and I know exactly what my process is. And we call it freedom mapping. I map your way to freedom to do the things you're really good at. And we all know exactly what our roles are within those functions. Our function basically is to serve the mission. And each one of us have very specific roles within that. And we trade off as somebody else comes in that's better at this stuff and I'm better at that. So there's no such thing as a job description. A job description is this static thing that you shoehorn people in. We use freedom mapping to actually find out, here's 10 things that have to be done on our team. Who's good at this? Well, Sally's good at number 1 through 3, and Fred's good at number 3 through 9. And we just divvy it up based on who's good.
And you also, so let's talk about freedom mapping, because you also talk about having, in effect, I can't remember the term you use. It's like a contract between people in the team and that.
Yeah, it's a commitment letter or agreement letter.
Commitment letter, that's it, yes.
Yeah. So with all these things, as you change from the factory system, which has 200 years worth of hold on us, anytime you try and change a habit, you need ceremony and ritual and new patterns in order to break the habit. So the bigger the change, the more ceremony there needs to be behind it. And a commitment letter is a great way to do that. We had a Declaration of Independence here in the United States. The reason we did that was we had a long history with King George. We had to figure out how to put some ceremony and break that thing. So everybody signed that thing, and your brain changes when you sign. So when we decide we're going to figure out what everybody's role is, we put that down on a piece of paper and we sign it. We put a little commitment letter to it, say, this is my part in the company. This is the mission. This is my role. This is my function. This is how I interact with the rest of my team. Here's the simple rules of being an adult at work, and we sign it. And we sign bits and pieces of it as we build those 12 tools. You might sign a little commitment letter for all of them. And then when you get them all done, put them all together and sign your declaration of interdependence, where we work as a team. And
you also you actually take quite a long time to talk about how you measure people.
Yeah.
And you talk about having I think it was a measurement of 7 out of 10, which was the figure that you need to.
We say it's 8 out of 10. We follow. I think it's Fred Reichhold's. I think Frank Reichhold's net performer score. He says basically an 8 on humans grade on a curve. 5 is not average. 8 is actually average.
Yeah.
And so if you get an 8, you're okay. 7.9, you're in trouble. So 8 out of 10, you're doing good. Anything above that, you're really killing it. If you got a 7.9, you're in trouble. So 8 is the bottom. 8 is the bottom. And we measure each other on a scale of 1 to 10. How well is Chuck upholding the mission of the organization? How well is he performing his freedom maps? And we grade each other, and we do it on a monthly or bi-monthly basis instead of once a year. The performance review gets eliminated by this, another top-down pyramid scheme. And we find out, sure enough, the performance review, Tim, did you actually know it decreases performance? When you
I'm not surprised.
It decreases performance.
I've seen a number of performance reviews, and I've seen a number of company when they send out questionnaires, and it really is. They're both demotivational.
Yeah, so these are not gotcha surveys. We call these peer recognition surveys, and the objective here is to have 90+% of it. You sharing with somebody. Here's something I saw you doing that's really great. Here's another thing you're really good at. Here's another thing, and here's one thing. If you did this would really help the team as well. So you got 1 out of 10 things that you can work on that you need to grow in, and you got 9 out of 10 that you're already good at. When people get that kind of affirmation, they're much more likely to grow.
Chuck, it's been fantastic talking to you. I loved the book, and I highly recommend people. I gave you a 5-star review on Amazon and Goodreads, so thank you for that. I really enjoyed it, and I know that you said to me before you came on that your daughter read it, and she couldn't put it down. And you joked with her, I'm surprised she picked it up. I actually, even though it's not a novel, I actually found it as a page turner.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was like, for me, it was revelation after revelation, because I've worked in so many factory system organizations and matrix organizations, which you point out a way of trying to fix the factory system, but it's still a factory system.
Lipstick on the pig.
Yeah, that's exactly what you say. Yeah, and I just it just formed. You know, there were so many questions, and then of course you then go, well, this is how you measure people. Oh yeah, of course, why you do that? This is how you recruit people. Oh yeah, this is how you get rid of people. Oh yeah, this of course.
Yeah. You're giving away my secret here, Tim. This is all simple humanity. If they just think in terms of being human with one another, they don't need to read the book.
Absolutely, Chuck. Thank you. Chuck, thank you so much for today. It does go very quickly. Thank you for sharing your insights. And best of luck with the book. And hopefully talk to you soon.
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks for everything. Bye.